welcome everyone. My name is Laurence Carter. I am a board member of MMEG, joined about a year ago. I have a couple of two daughters myself, and I just love the mission of MMEG to help improve access to higher education for women from developing countries. I think it's just a wonderful thing, and this is indeed how we change the world. Today it's a first for us. Super exciting. It's the first time we're holding a webinar with grantees solely from the arts, and we have 4 grantees today. Super interesting topics, all from different parts of the arts, and we'll hear about how each of them, what they're doing, how that ties into how they are making the world a better place. With that, let me just pass it over to Colin, who will be co-hosting together with me. So to you, Colin.
Hello. I was fortunate enough to join the MMEG board some years ago after I retired from 35 years with the World Bank. And I was a supporter before then. I've always believed in the cause. I still believe in it. I have 2 boys and a girl and 3 granddaughters and 1 grandson. So I have a vested interest in women's education and boys' education too. One point is that viewers can post questions. Please do, if you have questions you'd like to ask, please post them, and a little later in the talk we'll hopefully have enough time to address those questions as well and put them to the participants. But with that, I'll hand back to Laurence.
Okay, we're going to start off with a short video now, and then we're going to go straight into questions. And although we're going to have structured questions for the first part, as we get later on into it, I think it would be great if we can start getting questions from the audience, and even if the panelists have questions that they would like to ask each other, just to make it more of a conversation. So, Pelin, could you put up the short MMEG video, please?
1981. It all started with an idea. Find one exceptional woman, and she'll change the world. So we started small, with 1 grantee. Today, we've backed 460 from 75 countries. Esther became a Supreme Court judge, changing women's rights laws in Uganda. Malady makes influential films about social topics in India. And Josefina's organization improves the health of Nicaragua's most vulnerable. Our sincere gratitude to our volunteers, donors, and friends. We've done a lot in 40 years, and with your help, we'll do a lot more.
Okay, let's go to our first panelist, and I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, please, before you answer the first question. So, Afia, can you tell us a little about what you're doing now and how your work as an artist is contributing to uplifting the lives of women and children? Afia, I should say I just love your movie. Afia, over to you, please.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for that very generous thought. It's great to see some familiar faces, some new faces, and the artist cohort here from all different time zones. I'm currently here in the US, but originally from Pakistan. I'm not sure if anyone's from Pakistan, but hello if you're from that part of the world. I came to the US to undertake my MFA in film directing at Columbia University for film studies. Originally, back in Pakistan, I used to be a computer scientist. So at this point in time, I made a complete shift. I'm a practicing artist in the film and television industry. My first feature film, Dukhtar, is on Netflix, if anyone wants to check it out. It's a story of a mother on the run with her 10-year-old daughter to save her from child marriage. It was all shot in Pakistan, and it's a road trip thriller. I work in narrative cinema and making now a bridge into television with some TV shows and directing an episode of Chicago Med, an upcoming episode in the coming season. So I'm pretty excited about where things are beyond where MMG came in a long time ago. And I'm looking to work primarily in terms of storytelling, in terms of advocacy for women's issues and our own experiences. So I come from a part of Pakistan that's very conservative, and I grew up in a very, very conservative neighborhood also. So a lot of my films and themes explore what that part of the world looks and feels like. And I feel like, you know, our children, our daughters growing up really need to see themselves and their experiences reflected in cinema and television. That's something you don't see for women, and that's something you don't see, especially if you're a woman of color. So for me, this is very, very personal in terms of a mandate, is to make the experiences and to center the experiences of women and girls from our part of the world for the big screen and the small screen. So in all my work, I bring that untold perspective because I feel it's so important for our girls looking for role models like themselves to be seen and heard. You know, I grew up watching Star Wars with Luke Skywalker, which is a guy, you know, so I'm so excited that my daughter is growing up watching Rey as the protagonist of that story. So you know, in some ways, having that agency to be seen and heard as yourself and reflected in cinema, that's a truly powerful thing, and I'm hoping to harness that for all my work. So that, in a nutshell, is where I am with my work. And I'm happy to talk about it more, but I don't want to take too much time with the intros. But I do want to add one more thing, and that's, you know, in terms of bringing social justice issues to the fore, I feel like it's so important to create new kinds of audiences. So what I see from the release of my films, especially Dukhtar back in Pakistan, is that the message of change for a child marriage film, you know, it's a pretty tough social issue, but because it was in the form of a road trip, a thriller, it could easily be seen by masses. And so the underlying message of change and dignity for women and girls was received very widely. And I think this is super important for those of us in the arts, especially working in moving image, is to create those possibilities for that message of change and hope, so that the women and the men and the children watching it can see that and experience that in a very big way. So I'm gonna throw it back to Colin and Laurence to introduce other fellows.
Thank you very much, Afia. Very, very powerful message. Thank you. Terrific. Let me pass it to you now, Joe. You're speaking from Cape Town, one of my favorite cities in the whole world. Could you tell us how you see the contribution of the arts to uplifting and empowering women and children? Please, over to you, Joe.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna Glanville Shein, and I am a theatre maker, mostly focusing on scenography, which is kind of theatre design. But I also sort of became an accidental interdisciplinary artist because of COVID, because so I'm one of the more recent grantees. My grant was for 2020. And so I did my MA in the middle of COVID, and as a theatre maker, it was quite a shock to suddenly not be able to make theatre anymore with live audiences, and to really lose some of those immediate textures that are so dear to us in theatre making, and to suddenly have to find ways to navigate and negotiate that kind of emotional experience through other types of digital mediums. So my final theatre making piece was actually a film because it kind of had to be, and I couldn't rehearse with anybody. I could only work with myself and a single filmmaker. Those were the restrictions that my campus had. I wasn't allowed to do anything else than that. So had to spend a lot of time during this MA actually really looking very inwardly instead of what was the intention of my MA, which was to be a far more community orientated MA and to be far more involved in various communities and sonography in various communities. But because of COVID, and particularly because my husband is a frontline healthcare worker, he was working directly with COVID patients all the time. So I was a very high risk person in terms of transmission. My MA changed direction quite dramatically. But what it did kind of give me the space to start thinking through was the ways in which the arts really have the capacity to empower and uplift people in so many different ways. And it was really exciting to see the different types of forms that could take. I was no longer just located in theatre, but could kind of move across a number of different disciplines and to really experience and explore that. But my MA was actually born out of a project that I was involved in initially. And it's really difficult working in the arts sometimes because I think a lot of other fields tend to be a lot more quantifiable. When I see other people who are working in the sciences or working in kind of in systems and data, I get really jealous. I'm like, there's a before and an after, and there's measurements, and it's pretty easy, I think, or can be easier to see in real world terms or material terms, the sort of difference that you're making. Whereas it can be a little bit more difficult in the arts. But the project that I came from was, or the project that my master's was born out of, was a project here in Cape Town. It was a much sort of larger project that I was involved in. But essentially it started as a kind of public health and scientific initiative to try and understand why a particular group in the Western Cape had extremely high rates of chlamydia. And there was kind of these large public health rollouts and a lot of education and a huge amount of time and resource put into try and understanding why there were such high rates of chlamydia, but also to try and kind of demonstrate the correct biomedical knowledge around sexual health and to help women get tested. And they came back a year later and still the same number of women hadn't been tested. They knew about chlamydia, but weren't kind of taking any initiative to kind of rectify the issue. So then there was an arts program essentially that came in and tried to work directly in the community to understand why there were such high rates of chlamydia, but also to try and translate the correct biomedical knowledge. And I was kind of part of that process and part of that project. And from that, there were some really exciting experiments and experiences around how particularly sonography, which is design, could be used in this setting to talk about some really taboo and difficult and vulnerable issues around these women's lives and sexual health and sexual pleasure, as well as things like consent. And so it was a really incredible moment to watch a process unlock that hadn't been able to be unlocked through kind of more quantifiable measures like science and medical data, but rather became a set of really important conversations around consent and how women were able to live in that space, and kind of really came down to the capacity and the kind of the identity of the women in this space and feeling like they had the right to claim their bodies in a particular kind of way. And so that was really an incredible moment and shift for me in terms of the capacity of the arts, and was very exciting for my own research, the capacity of sonography and design and applications of that in theatre making and in facilitation in theatre. So in terms of that empowerment moment, that's really something that has shifted for me. Is it's difficult to quantify, but I think the kinds of spaces that we can open up with the arts can lead to really powerful transformations in very quiet ways, and open up spaces in very vulnerable moments for people, which can't always be managed through other types of systems. So that's why I think the arts is so exciting in terms of empowerment and upliftment, is through those kinds of moments.
Thank you very much, Jo. I think what you've said, it's really very thought-provoking. I'm just sitting here listening to you and thinking that actually all of the really special and wonderful things in life are not quantifiable. They're all, emotional things are just not quantifiable. So thank you very much. Great answer. Colin, let me pass it to you.
Yes, Andrea, welcome. And could you tell us how music has impacted your life, and what role it has to play in uplifting the lives of women and children?
Okay, good morning. First of all, I'm very honored and humbled to be here surrounded by these amazing people. And well, first of all, my background is music performance, but then after completing my master's degree in cello performance, I decided to study arts administration because I wanted to be in the background side of things, to be able to provide what was seen and how music was going to be seen by the public. So music provided me with the tools to obtain a higher education outside of Colombia. It also impacted the way impacted my life in uplifting it and making my surroundings brighter by showing me the beauty in everything, even by finding the beauty in the challenges that I run into in my pursuit of higher education in music. And I think when children and women see themselves represented by someone who is a woman and who was also a child, who was part of the same environment in which they are or they were, I think that gives them a sense of empowerment, and precisely that is the goal of the music festival that I bring every year to Colombia, where they get to learn different genres of music, but they also see their music represented in the music festival, and they themselves are the performers of these of the music that they are learning. So it's a combination of both the music of Colombia and world music, and for me that's a way for them to see themselves represented, and also I want to, by doing this festival, I want to change the view of music as something elitist, because only the people who is perceived as only the people who have the means are able to participate in this kind of events. So this music festival is free of charge. They get to learn for different genres of music that enrich their life and gives them the tools to be more competitive in the world, by maybe getting like linking that what they are learning and creating links with the teachers that are coming from the US in order for them to maybe obtain scholarships to study in the US, for example. And that's what I do.
Okay.
Oh, and right now, sorry, I forgot to say, I work. I am in the US. I work for the Empire State Youth Orchestra, which also aims to improve the life of kids in the region, upstate New York, by providing them with different ensembles like jazz ensembles, symphonic ensembles, and chamber music ensembles. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think you've taken a very unique path in music. I mean, I've known people who've gone into performance arts, with an instrument or singing, etc., but I haven't known anyone who's taken the path you have. And I have to say that I think music comes before language in that it's more fundamental to the human condition. When you consider how music is used to teach children things that are spoken, I think it's a very fundamental skill. And in a way, I think we benefit from electronic devices which have allowed us to have music, but at the same time, I think it's prevented a lot of people from learning a skill they would otherwise have learned before the advent of recorded music. Thank you. Natalia, it's great to have you here. Thank you again for staying up to your midnight. Can you tell us a little about what you're doing in the field of art therapy and how you came to be where you are now?
Okay, well, hello, thank you very much for having me, and good morning or good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Natalia, and I'm an art therapist, and before I jump into explaining what I'm doing, I would like to just give a little parenthesis of what art therapy is, because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are like, what is that? I've never heard of that. So it's basically psychotherapy through art, and I am trained to use art as a way of communication to help people express themselves and understand what's going on with whatever it is that they're dealing with at one certain moment. So it's basically, I use art as a communication tool to help my clients understand and get to know themselves better, which is basically what any therapist should do, only that they use different mediums. So I have been, after I graduated from Pratt Institute in New York, thankfully with a grant that I got from MMEG, I moved very briefly to Colombia, and I studied and I worked as a kindergarten teacher for a short period of time. And then from there I moved to Vietnam and also worked as a teacher, but I definitely understood that that wasn't the place for me, because I was never interested in, getting the kid to do that in a certain way. I wanted to understand why he was doing it this way and why he was struggling. So I understood that that educational part was definitely not where I wanted to go. So I opened up my private practice and started working with clients and with women and children in Vietnam. And the Pacific Links Foundation called me up, and they're an organization that has a halfway home for girls that have escaped human trafficking in the northern part of Vietnam, in the region of Sapa, where it's the border with China. And they wanted me to go in and work with the girls because they were very traumatized. So it was a very beautiful experience to be able to take art as a tool of communication and help them deal with their trauma. When Jo was explaining about her project of chlamydia in Africa, it really spoke to me on how art can really help other people further understand and express trauma and pain and fear that can sometimes not be put in words, because it's, whenever there's an event that is very, very traumatic, it's normally stored in the right hemisphere of the brain. It doesn't go into the left hemisphere of the brain. So when you're activating it by using art, it's sometimes better to process and to comprehend it in an artistic way. This is why music, drama, acting, things that we don't normally try and work with when we are helping ourselves out, it comes out easier when we're activating it in the non-rational side, which is all the artistic part of our brain is. So basically, for me, art has been a great tool to benefit women and children, and well, basically anyone, not only women and children, but thankfully my population, or let's say the main group of my clientele, has always been women and children, whether locals or expats, because unfortunately and fortunately, women and children are also the ones that are first to understand that perhaps they need mental help, and that perhaps it's okay not to be okay, and they're not afraid to step up. And this is also part of the cultural, things that we might have. I grew up in Colombia, and in Colombia, even though we're very modern, we still have a very chauvinistic society, and men are not allowed to cry, or, it's frowned upon, and women can, but women can't get angry, because if you get angry, you're crazy, but men can get angry. So it's allowing this kind of like cultural bias has also led more women to seek help than men. And of course, they also want to send their children to get them fixed. And I tell their moms, your kid doesn't need fixing. It just needs, like, he's reflecting something that's going on at home. So we need to understand what's going on behind that. And this is, the way that art has helped. It has helped basically people express themselves better and communicate themselves better, and in ways that sometimes words do not, they don't suffice to be able to carry that message further on.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Is in Bali, where you are now, is there much use of art therapy?
I mean, there is a big right now I'm going kind of like into my slump of the summer and also the second wave of COVID. So there's been, ever since COVID happened, there's been a lot of fluctuation of people coming in and out of the island. When the first wave hit, there was a massive, just people, because this is an island and there is a limited number of ICU beds. There was a big fear, and many people just decided to move to Java, where they have let's say, better ability to provide for more people. And also many expats left the island back to Europe, back to the States, back to Latin America, wherever they came from, just because of fear, and they wanted to be with a close one. So there was a big, let's say, emptied out of the island, and now it got filled up again. And now it's again getting emptied out again as the numbers are rising, and the situation in India and in Brazil is going a little bit more complicated. Again, they're starting to talk again about a second lockdown. So it is, it's, there is a lot of need for it, and there is, let's say, mental health facilities here in Asia, and it's, let's say, Indonesia is more open to mental health than many other Asian countries, because that loose of face thing that happens in Asia, where you can't ask for help, isn't as present here as I have noticed it in Vietnam or in Japan, or in other places where you just don't ask for help and you just deal with it the best way that you can. So here, yes, I think there's a big, let's say, need and market for it at the same time.
No, thank you.
Yep. Okay. So thank you, Natalia. That's very educational for me. I have a neighbor who I think is exploring using art therapy for their child. So it's a new introduction. Okay, we're going to go to, we're starting to get, we got some questions in on the chat.
Actually, one from Natalia.
Okay, Natalia, we have a question here for you. My eyesight.
Oh, here, when you start using art, music, movement, dance, one begins to engage more of that emotional feeling side of the brain, the right side of the brain, the emotional feeling, and be able to understand what was damaged and able to recover. Oh, thank you for your work. That's from Grace.
So it's more of a comment than a question.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to another round of questions. Why don't we start with you? We'll go the other way around. And the question is, tell us about the lessons you've learned. What, you've been doing it for some years now. What are the lessons that you've taken from your experience, please?
Wow, so many. But one of the biggest, I think, lessons that, or one of this like more simplest and valuable lessons that I've, like, the arts and this like experience has taught me, is that at the end of the day, we're all looking for the same thing. Everybody that comes to my, private practice, we're all looking to feel loved. We're all looking to feel held. We're all looking to feel validated. We're all looking to heal some wound from the past. And we just want to feel connected. And to feel connected is very important for being alive and for having a reason to live. And sometimes we go into like these very like intricate places trying to understand what's going on, or trying to try a person, help them understand what's going on there. And at the end of the day, it's just a matter of empathy, of holding space for them, of just being really able to connect and to listen, because there are so many like people out there that are feeling so lonely, and the COVID has brought up such a massive like toll on mental health all over the world. And it has brought up a lot of suicide and eating disorders, and just people feeling so afraid and unconnected. And at the end of the day, it's something that it's just not me as a therapist that could be doing it, but at the end of the day, we could all, and not only for women and children, but for everyone, it's just a matter of lending an ear, of being an empath, of listening, of connecting, of holding. And I think that that's probably one of the most valuable lessons of this journey that I've embarked.
Thank you, Natalia. That's very thoughtful, and also a new word for me, being an empath. I like that. I like that very much. I think we all need to do that. We all need to practice being an empath. Andrea, let me ask you the same question. What lessons have you learned? And by the way, just what you've done is just so cool, Andrea, with setting up a whole festival. But yeah, over to you, please. Tell us about the lessons.
Of course, that's with the help of many other people. Yes. So at this music festival, I also do it with a friend of mine that I met in my undergraduate. But yes, we both do it, and it's a great experience. So I've learned many things, but I think something that a lesson that I learned was that the opportunities are out there. You just have to be actively looking for them. And for example, with this music festival, we learned that usually the funds that are provided by the government are not sufficient. So in Colombia, at least, so we created a music festival, an online music festival during the pandemic, so that people could donate to the music festival for us to become a nonprofit and be able to get grants in the US as well in Colombia, so that we could bring even more people to Colombia and make a bigger impact. Another lesson I learned was that you have to, whenever you want to make an impact, you need to find a need. And for example, in my community, which is the city that I was born, Ibagué, the need of a music festival that was brought to the children, instead of the children having to go to this other music festival that is very far away, and then they have to spend so much money to go there. So bringing this music festival and portraying my heritage, their heritage, and showing them that there is a link between that and the world music. And yeah, those were the two lessons, most important lessons that I've learned throughout my path, my career.
Thank you, Andrea.
Sorry, just a little question, Andrea. The online festival you created was an Irish music festival. Is that right? Because I looked at the website. I see, and the idea there was to raise the funds then to support the Okobo music festival.
Exactly, because Okobo Music Festival has Okobo Mundial, which is something that we want to. Usually music festivals are only a month long or a 2-week long festival. But with this Okobo Mundial Festival, we want them to keep learning throughout the year. And the Irish Music Festival was a pilot to see if it could work. And it did. It was also free of charge. But the performances and all of those by the participants were available to those who donated more than $25, and in an effort to help Okobo Music Festival to be a reality next year.
I see, thank you. And just as a footnote, at the end of the question session, we'll have some short videos, one of which is Andrea's on the Okobo Music Festival. Joe, can I turn the question to you, what you've learned in your work about how to make a difference?
Sure. In fact, maybe I can even, I've just seen that Priscilla's also asked me a question, so in the chat, so maybe I can merge them in a sneaky way. Okay, so maybe I'll kind of start with Priscilla and then go into your thing. So Priscilla's asked me what information I use to create scenes, and do I change the scenes as the performance takes place to increase their impact for the audience? So I actually was not a performer initially. I studied performance for my first year at university, and I really didn't manage with it well. And I changed to scenography and to design. And then actually later on, and working in this project with these young women in Masipumalele here in the Western Cape, and kind of re-exploring, I realized that the reason that I couldn't perform and couldn't be sort of a theatre maker in the traditional sense was that theatre making really requires a person's body to be the first sort of port of call, the first thing that is involved in the process. And I didn't really feel like my body was available to me in a safe way. So I have a body that I think is really marked by a lot of trauma over the years. I struggled with disordered eating and sexual assault and many other kind of components of violence, which I speak about very openly as kind of a way to hopefully encourage other people to be open. But theatre making and using my body as a site of performance was not really an option for me, which is why I had kind of retreated from theatre making and rather focused on design. And through the process over the last 2 years, what I use to kind of create my scenes is that I use objects and place as kind of an intermediary between narrative and my body. So objects kind of almost take on personnel quality. I use them almost as mnemonic devices if they are sort of very memory laden. And I use objects and place as a way to kind of construct and manage memories and history and narrative. And then sometimes I can kind of put my body into the narrative, and then sometimes they take it out. So sometimes it's a very improvisational theatre piece that I create. So often what I will do is that the whole story will actually be sort of constructed through object and place, and I'll sort of manipulate and negotiate it on stage and then come out into the audience and experience it with the audience. And sometimes I'll go in and I'll take the place of some of the objects if I feel that my body can take on that kind of emotional restraint. So it's quite emotional, and it's often has to be quite improvisational, but really the kind of the process of the work that I have been undertaking is really to see the ways in which theatre and scenography can give me as a kind of a person and a theatre maker a space to heal and a space to safely explore trauma and history and memory. And hopefully through that find the kinds of approaches and devices that I could facilitate with other people who, I live in South Africa, and we have some of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world, as well as sexual assault and rape in the world. So the chances are, if you're interacting with a woman in South Africa, she's either seen or experienced or knows somebody who's experienced a lot of trauma directly related to her body. And so the methods and the approaches that I'm working towards is to try and find safe ways to navigate that don't ask a person to sort of re-traumatize themselves through trying to explain or explore their own histories and narratives. So that's how I come up with my scenes, and it does change depending on less impact for the audience, but more sort of how much I can manage as a performer and as somebody who's trying to create a practice of care in my theatre making. So that's kind of how I do that. And I can't remember the question that Colin asked. Sorry, it's gone. I'm sorry.
I think it was about what you've learned about how to make a difference through your work, but I think
okay, I think I did it.
Done it. I'm just curious, is your audiences tend to be mixed, or are they more male or female? I mean,
so far the work I've been creating has been very small because it's been predominantly during COVID, but it was tended to be quite mixed. And sometimes it was actually kind of a group interaction. So it was less of a performance and more a facilitated performance with other people. So we would all kind of participate in unpacking narratives together through various approaches that I had been developing through my master's degree, using scenography and using object and place as a way to sort of devise a narrative together safely using objects and place. And then sometimes a body would come in or a subject would come in and kind of renegotiate and kind of take on the qualities of a character in some way.
And finally, Afia, may I turn the question to you about what you've learned through your work, and also just as another thing, you mentioned that in Pakistan, film got a lot of it got a good reception, and I'm interested because the image we get of Pakistan from here, of course, is the more radical elements, etc., the conservative elements, which you think would not appreciate the topic of your film. So I'm just curious. I have the feeling that this, I've visited Pakistan myself, that if you take the broader society, it's not all that. So if you can answer that as well, how it was seen.
So let me answer the two-part question then. In terms of, some of the lessons that I learned, I really enjoyed hearing from the other three artists here. And I want to pick up on something that Andrea mentioned about opportunity. And it's so very important, especially as an artist, where you are expected to create opportunities for yourself, not just looking out for other existing opportunities, but creating something new for yourself, for your audiences. And that's one of the most challenging lessons that I learned as an artist, is how do I also think of myself as an entrepreneur? Because that is essentially what I was doing as a filmmaker when I made this bridge from my student life into the real world, was to grapple with a real entertainment industry. And so to understand and position my work as an artist and to fight for my voice, I had to understand how the business of film and TV works. And that was a whole other learning, but it was super important to embrace that part of the learning and to go with it. And one part of this, in terms of the learning is to not take rejection personally, because there's a whole lot of rejection, right? You apply for grants, you apply for opportunities, you're looking for avenues to find funding for your film, and there's going to be a lot of doors that will be shut. But the important thing is to not take that rejection personally and to continue fighting the good fight, and to perhaps look for that window that might open somewhere and a rope that might be thrown down, and for you to climb that rope and to then do what you need to do. So that I just wanted to put that out there, because that's such a hard part of being an artist, is to continuously trying to get momentum going for your work and to finding new avenues and opportunities. So keep on the good fight, I say. And the other part that I feel is so important in our line of work is to have mentorship opportunities. And I'm so grateful to all my mentors along this very long journey, who were part of this, creative force behind me. And I'm hoping now I'm at that stage where I can give back as a mentor. So I'm really excited about being part of that cycle and sort of giving back in some ways what I learned as an artist. So coming back to the second question that you posed about Pakistan and audiences, I think Pakistan is a country that lives in many centuries together, and there's all kinds of audiences. So what we experienced with the release of our film was that there's a thriving hunger in our part of the world for stories that are grounded in realism. Because usually, what we see in cinema from our part of the world is it's usually just, pure entertainment, pure fluff, where women are second-rate heroes of their own stories and are always objectified. So our audiences were not used to seeing and experiencing realism in stories. So it was a fresh change and a very welcome change, which really surprised me. I did not expect our film, that centers on an issue of child marriage, to have such a huge reception and a buy-in. I mean, we saw all kinds of new audiences, like grandmothers were bringing their families. And when a grandmother says, I want to go and watch a film, she's going to bring her children, her grandchildren, and her community, her friends. So there was a whole community that was built around the message of the film. And that's something we as artists, as producers, pushed out. So there was accompanying music videos, there was an accompanying social media campaign. So we really leveraged the power of social media to push this message of change and hope and bring in our audiences. And this is the generation, that really responds to messaging in a new kind of way. So we tapped into a whole different kind of vein in terms of messaging and outreach and building community and sort of centering the experience of the female gaze in a country that is not used to it. So I think we were pretty successful in doing that. And there's a whole range of stories now coming on films and television that is centered on these kinds of experiences. And there's an audience that's willing to watch it. So there is hope, I believe.
Thank you, Afia. Changing the world through storytelling, really changing the world through storytelling. Let me come back to Natalia. We've got an interesting question here for you, Natalia, which I have to say resonates with me personally, because I find art, I love to consume it, but I find it totally intimidating. I'm always wondering, how could someone be so artistic? So the question is, can someone who's not artistic benefit from art therapy? And I know when we talked last week, you told us this wonderful story about drawing stickmen and so on, but over to you, Natalia.
So I'm gonna do a little bit what Joe said, and I'm going to like put together the question that somebody said, what are the most common misconceptions about art therapy? Because it ties in very well with, do I have to be an artist to benefit from art therapy? And yeah, the question is no. Anybody can benefit from art therapy. And I always tell my clients, like, stick figures are fine. Nobody needs to, if I ask, we could probably do an experiment if we had enough time. If I asked everyone with, to have some colors, be like, okay, guys, what does anger look like to you? Draw anger. I could guarantee that about 70 to 80% of us would present something red and black. And it would have some like violent movement in there. And if I said, okay, guys, what is happiness? I could assure you that at least 90% of the people would bring up the color yellow, because there is this common language that we already speak with art and how we associate to colors, to figures, to things, that we don't have to be artists to be able to bring that apart. So it's not necessarily, you don't have to be an artist to be able to, draw anger or fear or express it or be able to manage watercolors properly. Sometimes I ask my clients to actually grab big pieces of clay and just pound them against the floor. And we do that in art therapy, and it releases a lot of emotion. And it's about allowing that feeling to come up and allowing that feeling to sit there. So no, you don't, it's not necessarily anybody can benefit from art therapy. And another of the big misconception is, oh no, that's only for children. No, it's not for children. I've had like 65-year-old men in my in my practice benefit from art therapy that had, never did anything other than a stick figure. They don't like to use color, but they still benefit from creating, because it's not just about drawing or the painting. I have all these different like tools, and sometimes I send them outside to the garden and I tell them, okay, tell me what this relationship feels like. And you bring it, and some people bring me rocks and flowers and a bird's nest, and another person would bring me something completely different. So I help them like tear this apart and interpret, what is that feeling like? Where is that feeling coming from? And then the other massive misconception about, what is art therapy is that art therapy is just sitting down and coloring in a book, or doing these like mandala books or coloring pages that they sell and promote nowadays as art therapy. That's not art therapy. That's art as therapy. That can be calming, that can be therapeutic. If you're going through a lot of anxiety, sitting in and coloring a mandala can help you calm down for sure, but that's not art therapy. So yeah, those are kind of, the three misconceptions of like the biggest misconceptions of art therapy. Oh, and that it's only for children. No, it's for everyone. And that only artists can benefit from it.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you. Joe, a question for you from Myra. Do you need groups similar or dissimilar for the therapeutic applications of your work? Does there have to be an audience?
So, I mean, my MA work I was by myself, and sometimes I had an audience and sometimes I didn't, but the final piece of work that I made, I kind of did on my own and made a piece of work by myself and then filmed it. And that process was extremely important for me. And there are elements of that piece that I might show to an audience live, but it's very personal, and it was really a process of healing for me. So I don't even know if I would show it to anybody again. But I think it's very powerful doing it with an audience, and I think doing it in a facilitated space. So I think this kind of process is very exciting for fields like applied theatre, which is using a lot of techniques from theatre making, but using it in a facilitation space with the intention of a kind of a form of therapy as well. But obviously has to be kind of controlled, obviously quite carefully. So I'm not a drama therapist, so I don't think I would do that in that way. But part of my MA did also work with other theatre makers and other artists, and we made work together as well, using some of these approaches that I was devising and kind of pulling together in my master's work. So in my experience, I don't know what it is yet, but I've used it by myself as a way to kind of unpack my own histories and my own narratives and to find ways to explore and understand them better. But I've also seen really exciting and interesting modes of working with other people and with an audience, and also kinds of larger facilitated moments with bigger groups of people as well.
Thank you. That's, I have to say, you've opened my eyes to a field that I was not aware of before. I have another general question for which to all of you, if anyone can answer, which is, do you see more people turning to art in times of high stress, like we're in the pandemic now? So anyone who wants to answer, or all maybe.
I don't, yeah, maybe we'll go one at a time. Oh, Afia, you can go first, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. So who has not been binging during the pandemic? I mean, the word binging didn't exist. I didn't know of this until I think the pandemic like made it real for us. So I think there's something to be said about the power of visuals and sound and everything coming together on the small screen. Yeah.
I think also people felt extremely disconnected with having everything move online. So something I really noticed was an increase in any moments that we could have emotional connections with each other. People were really desperate for it. And I think the arts has historically, and particularly at this moment, has been the perfect space and avenue for facilitated emotional connections. And especially because the arts tend to be under-resourced, artists tend to be extremely creative about how we go about facilitating those moments and those relationships. So the kinds of things that I saw happening online, the kind of theatre making I saw happening online, it was really, I mean, part of my exam as well, my final work was an entire piece of improvisational theatre made over Zoom, all of us in our own homes, making theatre in our own homes, but making sort of one piece through Zoom. So I think people absolutely were desperate for connection during this time, and artists are very clever and resourceful, and so I think have managed to find ways to connect to the digital medium even when we can't see each other face to face.
Sorry.
I was going to ask you, Andrea, if you had more time to play the cello?
Yes. Do you say that if I have more time to play the cello?
Yes.
Yeah. I also participated in the Irish Music Festival because I mean, you tell them to do something, but can you do it yourself? So I decided to also take the challenge to learn a different genre of music, because that's not what I'm used to. I'm used to classical music, and that only showed how the connection between all the genres of music, classical and then Irish music, and how they are all connected with each other. So yes, I found the time, and even more so right now, during the pandemic. That was also a blessing.
Well, that's and Natalia, also over to you. But I've got an additional question here for you, Natalia. Is there a social construct with color? I.e., in Asia, red is a celebration, not anger. That's a question.
White is death.
Is there a social, you mean as in what colors means in different countries?
Yes, I guess that's right.
Yes, I think that there is. For example, in India, people use white when they're mourning. And and they get married in red, and in the West is different. So yes, there's definitely a need to be socially aware and culturally aware of the client that you're dealing with and where their background is from and what colors mean to them, because what it means to them doesn't necessarily is what it means to me. So as a responsible therapist, you have to go a little bit deeper and inquire a little bit more about the background and about what, these things, what these colors mean to other people. But generally in the West, we will have the same associations, and in Asia, it'll be a little bit different. But now with globalization, there can be also a little bit of mixture of what is coming on. But yeah, that's definitely something that has to be, that is present and that, you have to be aware of.
Very good. I think we better bring it to a close.
Yeah, because we got the video.
Yes. Okay, so thank you so much, Natalia, Andrea, Joe, and Afia. It's been absolutely wonderful. I have to say, this has been one of the most thought-provoking and educational hours I've spent in the last year. It's just been wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a real privilege to listen to you and to learn. Colin will wrap up, and Madeleine, I think, also will say a few words. And then after that, please stay on, because we've got some short extracts from our artists, which will play 5 videos. Colin, over to you.
Well, just to thank you and say that you've made me regret my choice of engineering as a topic when I studied, and then economics. I think going into the arts would have been maybe more pleasurable. But thank you very much. And we have, I think, 3 short videos to play.
Yes, but Madeleine, do you want to say?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Madeleine.
Madeleine, you're on mute.
Thanks for reminding me. I was like, my mouth hung open. It was wonderful. And I really am so proud to think that we can call you our MEG grantees. Thank you for sharing this. And if I look at the comments, it was just wonderful. And I also want to have a very special thanks to Colin and to Laurence for putting this together, finding you, and giving us this opportunity to share your little bit of your lives with us. And now I'm going to ask the audience to bring their artistic side to the world and give us your vision of Women Build a Better World during our photo competition. It's over summer. You can go back to your archives. You can bring new photos. So this is something we keep on celebrating, our 40 years this year. So let us see what artistic feelings you have about Women Build a Better World. Thank you so much for all of you joining. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just to say that the 3 videos are Afia's trailer for Dukta movie, a video by Joe, and Andrea has sent a video as well. And the total, just to let you know, the total comes to about 7 minutes.
आपकी क्या कहानी है? तो आपका नाम भी नहीं मालूम।
15 साल की थी तो शादी हो गई, उसके बाद मेरी कहानी खत्म।
जो हमारा साथ देगा वो राज करेगा। बुनियाद का वास्ते तुम्हारा बेटी का हाथ चाहिए, हमारा वास्ते
वो बिल्कुल मुझे ज़ैनब का निकाह पढ़ाने आएगा।
क्या पता है तुझे?
दरवाजा खोलो।
तुमने हमारा इज्जत मिट्टी में मिला दिया। तुमको तो पता है हमारे यहाँ बेइज्जती का बदला कैसे लिया जाता है। كم زي كي مولد التختكم بيدلا
कोई तो ऐसी जगह होगी जहाँ आप पूरी ढूंढ ना पाए।
हमारा इज्जत वो था, वो हमारा है।
इस तरह तो नहीं रह सकते। बेबू को भी एक घर की जरूरत।
वो तो आपके साथ।
आजकल दोस्त दुश्मन का कोई पता नहीं चलता।
वो तुझे छोड़ेंगे नहीं। आपकी कोई बेटी है?
मेरी बेटी कोई नहीं।
फिर आपको क्या समझ आएगी?
So I will share Joe's video. If you can give me just 10 seconds.
I'm trying to talk about the things that my family couldn't talk about. I'm trying to talk about the things that everyone remembers differently. I'm trying to untangle my memories and understand them better. When it stays inside of me, it's only able to exist as a suppressed web of confusing and murky incidents, or as a perfectly formed, coherent narrative with all of the gaps childishly filled in. A story I tell myself to survive. I want it outside of myself. I want to see it from different perspectives. I want to let the snapshots I remember play out so that I can make sense of them. But I can't use my body. I can't tell stories with my body. I can't explore with my body. I can't remember with my body. My body is inhabited with quiet memories and triggers, many of which I have yet to identify. Sexual assault, anorexia, PTSD, psychological and emotional abuse. I need a moment in time, a place, a landscape that I'm able to control, to move in and out of, to build and destroy. I'm letting the place and the objects tell the story. I'm watching and moving them, trying to locate plot points and understand characters. Sometimes I feel moved to inhabit the moment with my own body, but only with the safety of being able to leave whenever I need to. I'm trying to talk about the things that were passed down in my family so that I can heal from it and don't pass them any further.
And finally, a YouTube video from Okobo Mundial Festival.
Whenever I first heard about this music festival, the Akobo Music Festival, not the March Irish, but the one that we're fundraising for, I just believed in it so quickly. Like it's not something that you had to like convince me of its worth. Like whenever you hear its mission and goals, like I just believed in it so quickly, and I think it's like so awesome that y'all have done this. And so I just wanted to do whatever I could to support that. So yeah, my routine became watch the teaching video, listen to it 1,000 times, different recordings, not just the same one. Find it on YouTube of someone playing it live and play along with it over and over again. And then sometimes I would revisit the teaching video just to make sure I like got the actual technique that he was saying. So I was like, oh, that would be weird if I totally forgot that. And then like eventually start playing it without the YouTube video, and then record whenever I felt ready. I'm a classically trained violinist. I work in marketing now, but I still like finding lots of different ways to play and be involved, which is one of the reasons why this like online sort of like digital festival is really appealing, was because like summer or like month-long music festivals only work for people who don't have full-time 9-to-5 job, like corporate career jobs. And so like I have always missed like the camaraderie and experience of music festivals because they were such a formative part of my life.
When you go to music festivals, you go for 2 months, however long that is, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Action, I mean, until the next year. So we wanted to keep this for people to be connected, to build an audience throughout the year.
I've always wanted to get into like jazz.
It's said it all along. Sorry.
So these are the videos. Thank you all for participating.